Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features Wolverine number 50, cover dated January 1992. This is a double-sized issue and it has a gimmick cover, but I kind of like the gimmick of this cover. It is a cardstock cover that is die cut to imply that Wolverine has slashed through this folder. We see the stamps top secret, Weapon X file, priority clearance only, not to be seen by Major Logan on this folder, and then through it we can see some of the contents of the folder, including various things to do with Wolverine's skeleton and pictures here of him and the Hudsons there, and also the central image here is of the antagonist that he is going to battle inside this double-paged issue. But we have other double-sized issue, but we have other little elements here, like his ID cards for the CIA and Canadian Secret Service. Over here we've got a picture of him and Sabretooth in Egypt. We've got a little match stick box from the Princess Bar that he co-owns in Madripoor. And we have another little memorable image here is the wedding invitation from the cover of Uncanny X-Men 172. So we see Marc Silvestri's version of that here, and that famous little, at least for me, written in address to Nightcrawler, hey elf, don't forget the beer, from W. So it's good stuff. I really like this. These two pages signed by Mark and Dan, so pencils by Marc Silvestri and inks by Dan Green. So let's continue with this, and we've got a lovely splash page here. This is picking up from the end of the previous issue where Wolverine left the X-Mansion. He's determined to get to the bottom of the truth of his past and his mixed up memories. And here he is aboard his motorcycle. He's cycled all the way from Westchester down to Midtown Manhattan, and he's coming up on the curb here and about to enter a building. So we get some pretty nice dialogue too. Hey, just who do you think you are, Buster, says the woman. Darling, if I knew the answer to that question, I wouldn't be here, he says as he drives into the lobby of the building. So the title of this story is Dreams of Gore, Phase 3. And the creative credits here, Larry Hama on script, pencils by Marc Silvestri, inks by Dan Green, with help from Hilary, Barta and Tom Palmer. I'll point out the Tom Palmer pages. Basically these two inkers quite complementary to Dan Green's style, but Tom Palmer has a very distinctive and very identifiable style of his own, and it's easy to see, at least for me in my eye, the pages that he contributed later in the issue. The colouring is by Steve Buccellato and the lettering by Pat Brousseau. Yeah, I really do like that splash page. Look how populated the street is. The fact that it's raining too. Silvestri not scrimping on the details. Into the lobby of the building, Wolverine drives the motorbike. And there's some good banter on his way in as well, where the guy says, somebody get his license number, gonna sue me? Asks Wolverine, I'm warning you, my lawyer's a psychotic mutant. Is that a redundancy or what? So he's wheeling his way up the stairs there to the elevator lift. And I really like this sequence here where he skids and turns into the elevator. So that's some big elevator, all right. There's a woman in the elevator. She doesn't get out in time. Best step back, darling, he says. Don't want them long legs brushing up against the hot tailpipe, do you? Want to hit the top floor button for me? That's really good stuff. But there is a guy in shadow outside and he's radioing in to someone. This is Security 7. He's coming up in elevator number 3. But he's going to have to transfer to a freight. The passenger cars don't go all the way to the roof. Okay, now we get a nice little double time sequence here, then and now. And so then back at the X-Mansion, we've got Wolverine coming up to Forge. He's wearing his Jim Lee designed X uniform there, which is interesting because it's of the time period. And he's asking Forge a question. Forge, since you're Mr. Know-It-All around here, the SHIELD helicarrier, how do they resupply that thing? So we know now that Wolverine wants to get on the SHIELD helicarrier. Meanwhile, he's having this conversation with the woman in the lift. And I love the little icicles coming from her speech balloon, indicating the tone in which she's saying what she says. It's against the law to smoke that nasty cigar in here. and you really should be taking that greasy machine up in the freight elevator. And he responds to her, the cigar ain't lit, the scoot ain't greasy, and the freight ain't my cup of tea. Besides, they're expecting me to take the freight. But back in time, he's learning from Forge how the Shield helicarrier is resupplied. Mostly, it's airlifted by big trains, transports, except for the water and jet fuel. That thing has 3 reactors and a squadron of JP-4 guzzling fighters. Do the math. They usually pipe both aboard at night from ships at sea, but since the Middle East brouhaha diverted half the fleet, so he's talking there about Desert Storm, the first Gulf War, half the fleet they've been resupplying from a covert urban site. So here we go. So the covert urban site happens to be in Midtown Manhattan. Wolverine asks him, that covert site, you wouldn't happen to know where it is? Meanwhile, the elevators hit the 60th floor there with Wolverine and the woman. So let's turn the page. And Forge is here. Look at the way his eyes are narrowed there. He's thinking, what's Wolverine up to? Yeah, it's the top of the City Corps building in Midtown Manhattan. You're going to frontal assault the Shield helicarrier with your motorcycle. And there we are now. It's the Shield helicarrier. Here it is. It's hovering above Midtown Manhattan, that specific skyscraper building. Really good shot of the helicarrier there. Marc Silvestri afraid to draw nothing. You can see the Twin Towers there in the background. So we're looking south down towards the southern tip of Manhattan. Really, really good stuff. And Colonel Fury's been alerted to... We seem to have a controllable compromise in the security envelope. So Nick Fury responds, are you trying to tell me that some hairy mutant gave the guards the slip? You think throwing in that word controllable will mitigate my attitude about this cluster foul-up, Lieutenant? Of course, this is a Comics Code approved comic, and therefore we have to have foul-up instead of you know what. Because we know the way that Nick Fury would actually talk in real life and the phrase that he would use in that situation. So the guy comes up to him and says, sir, I'm prepared to take full responsibility, but Fury cuts him off. Then you better get your young keister in gear and uncompromise that security envelope. Am I making myself clear? And back then, what does Wolverine say to Forge? He says, yep, that's exactly what I'm planning to do. So we're about to see that happen now. That's good stuff. What a great opening by Hama and Silvestri. So here's the Shield crew waiting at the freight elevator door. It's opening, but there's nobody inside. And what's Wolverine done? Well, he's pushed the motorbike up the stairs to the top of the skyscraper. That's a really nice panel there. I love the way that everything is silhouetted out. It's kind of comic as well with the sound effects there by Pat Brousseau. And then we get a nice top-down angle on the Shield helicarrier, and we get to see Wolverine emerging from the top of the stairwell there on the motorbike. He took the stairs, says the Shield guy. Great anchor image of him here on the motorbike. I always knew that watching those Evel Knievel specials would come in handy someday. A real wealth of practical information. That's good stuff. And yeah, so we're going to see some really cool action now. You can see it. We've just got our 4 panels here. He's leaping off the top of the building, coming towards the helicarrier's bridge and command center. Kind of comic acting here. Nick Fury putting his fingers in his ears. His crew baffled at why he's doing that, because they think the erstwhile intruder is going to splatter like a bug on a windshield when he hits the armored Lexan laminated windows. But Fury says to them, you ever hear of adamantium, Lieutenant? And there we go. Great anchor image here of Wolverine slashing his way through those laminated windows. Really cool stuff. And everybody taking cover there from the shattered glass. Really love the musculature there on Wolverine's arm. The implication of speed as he's hurtling towards that window. Really well done. And then he skids to a halt on the motorbike right at the feet of Nick Fury. So what a well-timed and directed jump from Wolverine. And Wolverine tells Fury, you're going to tell the Shield crew to lay off. Now, why would I do that? says Fury. I love that perspective on Fury. Love the way his hands are on his hips there. Like he's not at all concerned or worried about Wolverine. These two tough guys facing off against each other, and no fear on either side. Well, Wolverine's got an ace up his sleeve, so to speak. He's wearing a sleeveless vest, but you know the expression, because the director of Central Intelligence is going to want you to the man's got a lot of juice. Why? Asks Fury. Cause you're going to get on the direct line to him and tell him that I know all about El Tigre and Emilio Gara and what they were doing in Cuba in 1963, and maybe, just maybe, he should think twice about letting the old knucklehead read his own security dossier. So this is nice stuff. I like the way that Logan just takes the stogie out of Fury's hand and lights his own cigar because it wasn't lit in the lift on the way up. So he's cool as a cucumber, and he knows he's got Fury backed into a corner here. So Fury picks up the direct line. I suppose if anything happens to you, a letter gets dropped off at the Daily Bugle. Natch, says Wolverine, arms crossed. Might take a while. You got 10 minutes. This is great tough guy dialogue, macho dialogue from Larry Hama in the script. And now something interesting happens after that really action-packed opening. What a great sequence. And I like the way that Hama's thought it all out. You know, the procedural of how does the helicarrier get resupplied, and then if it was in Midtown Manhattan at the top of this particular skyscraper, then how would Wolverine get a motorbike up there, and so on and so forth. He's really thinking out the action. So good stuff. Now, the file's coming through on the fax, Logan, but something, that file request and being sent triggers something. A flag just went up on our monitoring scanner down in Maryland. Says, who is it? An FBI guy maybe? You know that program, not Maryland, like CIA. Is it a CIA guy? You know that program we run that picks out the anomalies in the retrieval system of the National Security Agency's computer banks? Says the desk guy. It just paid off in spades. So his supervisor says, very good, Parsons. I'd better show these to the boss. These are SHIELD files that haven't been pulled for over 20 years. Was this the only hard copy, Parsons, says the guy as he walks down through this big office space towards these big double doors. Yes, sir, says Parsons. Erase all records of this in our system, says the manager. So he knocks on the big doors. He's told to enter. And this is interesting. Look at this big boss office. So who is the big boss? A flag you personally wrote into the program on October 5th, 1972. The flag activator is the name Logan, he says to the boss in the chair. I'm perfectly capable of remembering my own actions, says the boss in shadow. Hooded. So who is this figure? Well, it's a commander of Hydra, but who exactly? Well, we'll discover later in the issue. Did our penetration device detect anybody else flagging and monitoring this file and cross-references? So the answer is yes. A data flow to another system was traced that matches the file volume exactly. It's a desktop system at the Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C. The pest control section of all places. Go back to your desk, says the boss. As you command, says. Now we know, a Hydra agent. So really intriguing stuff. We're getting a mystery developing here in respect of what on earth could Hydra's involvement be in Wolverine's origin story, at least in respect of Weapon X and the adamantium being laced to his skeleton. The next day in Washington, D.C., Wolverine's still wearing the jeans and the black vest. So I guess we got to infer that he rode that motorbike all the way from New York down to Washington, D.C., which I suppose he could do in one trip, especially with the determination he has. Now, this is a nice little sequence here. You know, it's not particularly, there's no super heroics going on. It's basically an office in Washington, D.C., but I like the establishing shot here. Just a woman sitting on the bench there with the pigeons, the winter or at least autumnal environment. It's really well done. And then Wolverine arguing with the secretary who's being tasked with allowing no one into the head office. So she says, when he's looking for the bald-headed professor guy, who's the director of the pest control section. She says, there's no such person, no such section, get your knuckles off my desk. I like the way that she's got her chin jutted out there in Silvestri's pencils. It's really well done. The acting in these panels, Wolverine not taking that for an answer. Then the file I got from the NSA must be wrong. He yells, I guess this pest control section was never set up 20 years ago as a front for a real nasty dirty tricks project. I guess that guy I smell cowering behind this door couldn't possibly be the professor, sometimes known as Andre in my dreams, because that's his code name in the previous issue, in the scenario in Ontario. Get away from that door, she says, and if you're thinking of force, you should know that there's steel plate under the wood veneer, but that's not going to stop Wolverine. So he pops his claws, we get the classic sound effect, snicked, and schlunk as the claws go through both the wood and the steel. You ever hear of adamantium, lady, says Wolverine. Ask the professor, he knows all about it. So, are we going to see what's on the other side of the door? Well, he retracts the claws, heads out, he says, I'm going to nail the professor, but I'm going to do it legal. With all the hard evidence I'm going to track down, starting with the warehouse up in Windsor, Ontario. That's what I just mentioned a few seconds ago. And you can tell his pal Hines that if she wants to tail the old hairy mutant, she's got to stay downwind. So she was doing that in the previous issue, but she was sniffed out by Wolverine. So she's biting her fingernails there. Did you hear that? Not even Shiva can stop him. So this is the Shiva scenario part 3, the finale. So we're going to learn what Shiva is in this issue. Stop that gibbering, says the Professor Hines. We've work to do. Pull yourself together. Procure us transport to Canada. And we see he's got a hook for a hand. So that implies that one event in Barry Windsor Smith's Weapon X did indeed take place. That Wolverine did, or Logan did, cut off the Professor's hand. We're not going back up there, asks Hines incredulously. We want to be sure that Shiva does his job. So that afternoon, Wolverine's being picked up on the X-Men's Blackbird. Everybody's getting into uniform, and Wolverine is back in his original yellow and blue costume, which Jean thinks about. Look at you, Logan, the costume change, your very mannerisms. It's as if you're reverting to the man the X-Men first met years ago, and that frightens me. So why is Wolverine back in the original costume? Well, it's because Jim Lee wanted it so. And he did that. He made that decision for starting with X-Men number 4, which is Adjectiveless X-Men number 4, which is also out this particular month. So that's Jim Lee's creative decision, but Larry Hama making story capital out of it, the detail of the costume change and the implication of reversion that Jean is afraid of. But they're making their way to Windsor here, and Professor X is along as well as Jubilee. They land on top of this building in Windsor, and Wolverine gets out and he wants to go alone. You can't come with me, Jubilee. This is something I got to do by myself. Xavier and Jean are right there, and if they can't tell if something's gone wrong, I'm in more trouble than I can get out of with your help. So down he goes and jumps off the back of the Blackbird onto the roof of the building. And he's being watched by Hines and the Professor. They got there first. He won't take them down into his murky past with him, he says to Hines. The X-Men won't go with him. And they're being watched by Hydra. The pest control people have arrived. They're maintaining surveillance from the adjacent roof. Just as I expected, says the hooded boss. Keep track of both parties. As you command, says the Hydra soldier. All hail Hydra. And this is interesting. What's the response from the commander? Yes, yes, hail and all that. So the commander, whoever it is not exactly a true believer, ideologue of the Hydra persuasion, which itself is intriguing and will tie into the revelation of who this is a little later in the story. So now Wolverine is into the building, and what does he find? Lights, backdrops, the whole floor is a big soundstage. Everything you need to make movies is here, except the cameras. Is that what my past is? A cheap movie? So this is Hama exploring what was implied by the last couple of chapters, especially the last one of Barry Windsor Smith's Weapon X, that Wolverine or Logan rather, had memory implants as part of Experiment X. And here we're seeing the sound stages, the backdrops for these implanted memories. It's the terrorist hideout from that weird memory flashback. So we saw this in issue 48, the place, 48 and 49, the place I raided with Sabretooth, where Silver Fox tried to kill him. It was really in Windsor. Some of what I remembered must be true. And then he walks on these spectacles on the floor. Let's have a look, see what he makes of those. Get past the advertisements here. They are the professor's glasses, so he recognizes them. But whose? Something different here. San Francisco newspapers and flyers. And that calendar. What happened to the picture of the cabin? There was a calendar picture of the cabin I lived in with Silver Fox, and we saw that in the previous issue. I opened my eyes after I hit the floor, and this calendar was right in my face. I was staring at the cabin when Mastodon came crashing in through that window with the wind blowing in behind him off the river. No, what's going on here? This place wasn't in San Francisco. So there's a mystery building here, and he asks himself the question in his first person monologue, whose memories are these anyway? So he starts slashing through all of these scenes, these stage settings, the saloon, where he went eyebrows to knuckles with Sabretooth for the first time. And that's a reference back to Chris Claremont, John Buscema, and Bill Sienkiewicz's issue number 10 of Wolverine. A sawmill. Somebody with claws had a knockdown drag out to beat the band in here, but I sure don't remember it. So not one of his memories, but whose could it be? Sabretooth's? A senior prom. Castroville Heights senior prom. This really tears it. How many of us were here getting our memories scrambled in this joint? For what reason, he asks. And I like the way now, excuse me, that that we have this sequence of small panels as Wolverine is ripping through all of these stages. Somebody's living room, computer lab, a jungle. I remember every jungle I've ever been in, and this ain't one of them. And then he's gone through all of them, checked them all out, and the one I was dreading finding wasn't there. No cabin. That little place in the woods where I lived with Silver Fox, there's a chance that the one shining golden time in my life, was real, and he's beaming there. Great upshot on him from Silvestri. And Professor X catches the moment of joy for Wolverine. I just picked up a mind blast of the most pure and utter happiness from Wolverine, he says. We needn't divert precious energies to monitoring his state of mind. So what they have is they've got the files that that Nick Fury got for Wolverine, and they're working their way through them. And Forge has developed a computer program to go through them, which is a program to analyze the data, set up comparison fields, match numbers, list anomalies, and run flag searches with enough hands on the keyboards. This may not take as long as we feared, says Cyclops. And Jubilee's getting impatient. And so we get a time reference here. I don't even like staring at a computer screen if Mario's running across it in his raccoon suit. If Wolvie's having such a great time down there, why are we stuck up here without even an in-flight movie? Those turtles have a pizza warmer in their van. You think we'd at least have a slushy machine? That's enough, says Cyclops. He sits her down, and starts crunching numbers and lists. It's good stuff. So we're going to go back to Wolverine. No, first of all, we pick up with Hines and the Professor. They're making their way into the same building. He's 5 flights above us on the top floor, says Hines. I really like the silhouetting here and the drapery of their 3/4 length coats. That's really well done. He's 5 flights above us on the top floor. Do you think he figured it out yet? That we reuse the same sets to save money, says the Professor. That's all the subjects of the project have. That all the subjects of the project have overlapping false memories. He asks the rhetorical question. You're ascribing powers of deduction to this subject that are out of proportion to his known capacities. So the professor, always condescending, always supercilious. Good, he says, entering into the central command center. It seems to be intact, he says. Let's hope the tubes haven't burned out in the low-light surveillance cameras. Why a command center? Asks Hines. I thought Shiva was self-activating. He is, says the professor, but we thought it best to have some options available after activation. So he's got this plug-in command unit that he plugs into the computer board with cancel, reset, and default on it. Has he found Shiva yet? Asks Hines. So the surveillance cameras are working. He hasn't even stumbled on the random intruder eliminator yet, says the professor. Again, I just really like the drapery there. Marc Silvestri does it so well. Copied by some of the Top Cow artists afterwards, but he's the original and best at that kind of drapery. Ain't this something, thinks Wolverine, as he hits the trapdoor, which is what the professor was talking about. Falls down this pit, but of course he uses his claws to break his fall, hang in the side of the wall, sees all these other characters that have fallen into the spikes. Just a world of hurt at the bottom of the pit. What's at the bottom of those stairs? That somebody don't want anybody to see this bad. What's at the bottom of the stairs? Ain't that a kick in the head? It's something I've seen before. Turn the page. Yeah, we saw this in issue 48. I saw this vault door in that dream trip I took. We saw it in issue 48. He didn't see it, but then he did see it in 49 in the dream trip. But it was at the Project X complex. What's it doing here, he asks. Solid. And then we see the sign on it. Shiva, no access without clearance. No way I can cut through that. The professor here watching. This is what stopped the other one. He couldn't get into the vault. We were able to reprogram him, put him back into the pool. So who's he talking about? Is he talking about Sabretooth? Ashamed to lose this one. He's so special. He's staring at the keyhole. Is he going to make the connection? The other one never even found his key. He kept it. He had it with him, says the professor. This one is quite exceptional. So this is the key he picked up in issue 48 on a hunch. He never ceases to surprise me. I really like the detail here of Wolverine pulling the key in its pouch from the other side of his belt. That's really, really well done. And now the door opens. Look how huge it is. Great top-down shot there. And there's something inside. We get some Kirby crackle around it. It's Shiva. I am the destroyer, says the robot. So Wolverine here punched on the chin. He's just rubbing his chin there with his fingers and looking at the prospect of taking on this big beast of a robot. Great anchor image there by Silvestri. Really good stuff. And now another great anchor image of Wolverine extruding the claws. Double snick there. He says to Shiva, is that supposed to impress me, bub? Because it sure don't. Come on, bub. Let's see you do some destroying. So Wolverine not at all cowed by Shiva. Oh my, says Hines. Just a temporary setback, Hines. Now we shall see what Shiva's all about. So here comes the twist. By the way, I love the lighting here on the professor's face. Great spotting of blacks there. We'll see what Shiva's all about. So Wolverine in his first person narration, not impressed. Put a fancy suit on an android and he thinks he's hot stuff. That an axiom? Should be. Meanwhile, the X-Men are hovering in the Blackbird. Professor Xavier, look at what showed up in the last sort, says Cyclops. Amazing. This is the very proposal for the Weapon X program. Now this is interesting here in this dialogue, what we learn. Its purpose to create a pool of super soldiers, awareness of their own powers selectively mind-wiped from their memories, says the professor. The candidates were then warehoused in the general population until they were needed and then reactivated and controlled. But then he asks the question, he's musing there, where did the mutations come from? Did they, and he was about to ask, we suppose, did they artificially create them? Is Wolverine's part of his mutation artificially created by genetic manipulation? Is a question that's raised here by what the professor was about to ask. But Cyclops interrupts him and says, Professor, look at this. memo about suppression of aging factors. So an explanation as to why Logan and Creed, why Wolverine and Sabretooth don't age, that it was something to do with the Weapon X program. In any case, we're back to Shiva, so we see more of that Kirby crackle there. The robot renewed. I'm Shiva, I'm the destroyer. Shiva is the program, explains the professor to Hines. The killer robot is just its tool. And Shiva learns from his mistakes. You can't fool him the same way twice. So this is a lot like Alan Moore's The Fury from the Captain Britain series. So Larry Hama drawing on that. And of course, like Terminator 2. Pulled yourself back together, huh, bub, asks Logan. I had my sound dampers on. You've been upgraded with infrared detectors, Logan, says Shiva. Nah, I can smell the solder on your hot circuit boards. You know my name. Of course I do. You're my primary target, says Shiva. You are first on my list. So now we're back to the action. Shiva punching Logan through the stages. So he's back in that bar from Wolverine number 10, it looks like. And back aboard the Blackbird, Jubilee has found a list. And look at the names on it. Wolverine, Sabretooth, Fox, Kestrel, Vole, Mastodon, Wildcat. And look at who's on it. Why is Wolverine's the first name? Asked the professor. Because he's excellent, says Jubilee. I like that. And I like the expression on her face there as well. That may be Jubilee, but it might also be prioritization. And if so, for what? Muses the professor. So Shiva's going to explain that which the project creates, the project must be able to destroy, the scales must balance, order must be restored. So Wolverine's first on the elimination list because he's the most dangerous. But the reader is wondering, who are these others? Who's Fox? Who's Kestrel? Who's Vole? Mastodon we've seen. Who's Wildcat? Interesting. And do they ever turn up in subsequent Marvel comics? I don't recognize them from any subsequent comics. Maybe some of you watching this video do. If so, let us know. I had you pegged for a neatness freak, says Logan as he takes that punch to the jaw. If you wasn't a robot, I'd say it was lousy potty training. So Logan, cracking jokes. Hines there baffled. I don't understand. You can just order up another one every time one gets destroyed. The professor says, don't be ridiculous. He's always condescending, is the professor. We had a limited budget, he says. We have a finite number of backups, but they're quite sufficient. So he's confident there, arrogant as ever, the professor. Now, Wolverine taking on Shiva, whose armor is reminiscent of Silver Samurai, really, yes? I put you through the chop shop once, and I guess it didn't stick. This time, I'm making sure that none of the king's horses put you back together again. So Shiva attacking him, saying, can you survive your mistakes long enough to benefit from them? And the professor continues with his explanations. The security committee felt that the project was too dangerous. We had to have safeguards. After all, we were putting perfect killing machines back into the general population. We needed a failsafe. Now, who's this entering the central command center? It is the Hydra commander. But who is it? I just hope we didn't underestimate the survivability of the subjects, says the professor. So, Hines is cold-cocked there with the gun. Nap time, Hines, says the figure in the cloak. This should be on a page turn, really. And you, professor, or should I call you Andre? Don't even twitch and keep that hook where I can see it. Andre, says the professor. I love the way that his nose is right on the muzzle of the gun there. She is pushing it beneath his nose. Then that name is from a subject scenario. So that isn't the professor's real name. How do you... That room they're fighting in, she says as she looks at the computer screen. I know that room. You know about the Windsor set? Windsor. That was my apartment in San Francisco. So the San Francisco scenes are Silver Fox's memories. And here she is. She's still alive. She's not dead. Sabretooth didn't kill her. We lost track of you 20 years ago. So this is a big twist from Hama, playing on both Claremont's Wolverine number 10 and Barry Windsor-Smith's Weapon X. It's good stuff. Unexpected. You messed up, bub, says Wolverine. I can come up with moves you've never scanned. I got moves like Carter's got little pills. And the Terminator, it is the Terminator, says your resistance to termination is futile, Logan. I'm equipped with the triggers. Now, here comes a little surprise. What are the triggers? Which are electronic pulses that activate neurosynthetic implants in your cerebral cortex. So first, you know, we got to think to ourselves, those are things that they're going to have to be removed from Wolverine's brain by Forge and Professor X acting together after this little adventure. So these implants trigger a cataclysmic memory backlash, all your suppressed trauma. So we see it here, Wolverine getting shot in the Windsor scenario. We've got the hand here going up against him. We have got Donald Pierce's cyborgs here, Reese, Cole and Macon going up against him. And the implication is maybe in respect of Uncanny X-Men 205. We've got a scene here from World War II, Nazi soldiers, because Wolverine, Logan, was a soldier in World War II. That was established in issue 34. You can't run away from it, Logan, says Shiva coming after him. And you can't defend yourself while your own memories betray you. So this is the Castroville High senior prom, and that's Silver Fox's senior prom, as she remembers it. Something happened that night that I'd forgotten, she says. So we're going to see what that is. Shiva's continuing to go after Logan. By the way, I said I'd give you a heads up when we got Tom Palmer on the inks. This is a Tom Palmer page. So you can see the looseness of the ink brush line in Palmer's inks, also cutting in some white media too. It's really, really organic, fluent inking, loose and organic from Palmer. So we've got all these ghosts coming up from Logan's past, all these most traumatic moments. Lady Deathstrike there from issue 205. We've got Ogun there, Kitty Pryde turned to Ogun's dark side. Sabretooth, of course, always, and they're attacking him there in the middle of those thorns. Hell, Logan, says Shiva, bellow like a low beast, a beast who knows that death is near. But Logan insists, as he has been over the course of this trilogy, not beast, not animal. And as he did in the final chapter of Barry Windsor Smith's Weapon X, human, Logan. So he unleashes at the Shiva robot, you can't kill me with memories. Great anchor image there. And here we are with Silver Fox. So these 2 pages also inked by Tom Palmer. And she's remembering her senior prom. But now I remember, how could this memory have been buried all these years? Silver Fox, asks this girl, your date is in trouble out in the parking lot. So he's the date in the parking lot is getting beaten up. Love the period car here by Silvestri. She goes out and what's going on here? He's being beaten up by these 3 guys. You just don't know your place. Who do you think you are, bringing one of them to our prom? So an implication of racist bigotry here against Silver Fox, who is Indian, Native American. Oh, Logan, she says, get your hands off me, but go home. I don't want to see you anymore. That doesn't sound like him. And she's shocked, taken aback. He wouldn't have done that. That's a lie. It never happened. What about the cabin? So she also holds on to that memory of the cabin. And the professor's disgusted. That blasted cabin implant. And that's a shock too, that it is an implant. Wolverine thinks it's not, but it is. It leaks through the suppression program in every subject. They don't remember their integral weapon systems. What does that mean? Integral weapon system. So something within themselves. Logan's claws. What does that imply about Silver Fox? If she's a subject of the program, she's got to have integral weapon systems as well. Does she have claws too? Give me that, he says, as he goes to grab the gun from her, and she fires off some rounds. Hines is still unconscious on the floor. We don't see what happens next, but we'll see the aftermath towards the end of the story. So at this point up in the Blackbird, Professor X says, Cyclops, I traced that mysterious list through its subheadings. It was stored in a file marked termination parameters for Project X. I'm afraid it's an elimination priority, but Wolvie's first on the list, says Jubilee. We better get down there. So yeah, we're thinking that the X-Men better get down there quick. And Shiva here is still boasting about how he can't be stopped. My only purpose is to destroy subjects just like you. Nobody else is just like me, counters Wolverine. So this is Hilary Barta on inks on these pages. So we just get 3 pages of Tom Palmer inks. I'm bad to the adamantium laced bone, says Logan, and the more you hurt me, the badder I get. So he's slashing Shiva up there. Time to lay down and die, robot, or shut down, or whatever a machine does when it takes the Oblivion Express to Nowhereville. Now that reminds me a little bit like Wolverine had a different attitude to LCD, but he's got a harder-nosed attitude to Shiva. Shiva, he says. What kind of name is that for a robot? So the robot counters Shiva, the terrible aspect of cosmic dissolution. That's from Hinduism. I am a program, not a robot. You cannot escape me. I am Legion. But Logan not impressed. You're just a pile of scrap metal, bub. He counters. And you ain't even sorted for recycling. He's got to work a joke in. So the X-Men arrive, finally, and Wolverine takes care of Shiva for himself, cutting the head off the robot. Yeah, watch where you scatter that junk, says Jubilee. Wolvie. But he's not happy. Darling, leave me be. And Jean hears a woman scream from downstairs. So that is where Logan was going. He was going downstairs. He was en route to the control command center. And here we see it's like an image from Weapon X. The professor there, missing his hand, but he's got the hook there. And Hines explains, I came to and he was dead. His hook was activating the reset and default switches on the Shiva override. And then I looked up at the screen. They were all filing out. They were chanting a name like a mantra. Sabretooth. The Shiva program just moved down the list to the next name, says someone. And Logan just simply lights up his stogie again. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. It's his problem now. And everybody's just looking at him in silence. So interesting here, there's claws. Jubilee says that guy looks like he was ripped apart by claws. So are they Silver Fox's claws? Was that her integral weapon system? Or did Sabretooth show up? Is that why the professor moved Shiva down the list so as to attack Sabretooth if Sabretooth showed up in the control command center? Like, there's little mysteries here to be resolved in the future. But Wolverine just wants to be left alone and doesn't care about Sabretooth. So Jean here picking up on what she thought earlier. Logan, what about all those other code names on the list? Some of them could be mutants who have no idea what they really are. And Jubilee fills in, yeah, and won't know that something is coming after them. They might even be people we know. How can you be so cold? How can you just walk away? Don't you care? Like, what about Vole and Kestrel? I fear, my X-Men, says the professor, that the Wolverine that was reborn tonight may be a far, far different man than the one we have known. Heaven help us all. So that's what Jean was worried about. Why go back to the yellow and blue costume? Why this colder, darker attitude than he's had over previous years in terms of the route that Chris Claremont took him to becoming, in a strange way, the moral heart and core of the X-Men. Now he seems to have become tougher and more ruthless and less caring because of his looking into his past and the whole Experiment X, Project X, Weapon X program. But we've learned some interesting things in the course of this three-part story by Hama. And there's 2 pages of letters here, including people seeing Marc Silvestri's new style, like this letter writer. Never before have I beheld such Jim Lee-esque artwork from somebody different than Jim Lee, that is. Are you sure Lee didn't do some layouts? So what's the answer here? We won't. It says, and by the way, Marc did all the artwork for number 48, but thank you for the Jim Lee comparison, since Marc is Jim's #1 fan. So this is Marc Silvestri altering his style, bringing in some cross-hatching into the penciling, and it's all in response to the popularity of Jim Lee's style in the period. So Silvestri feeling a little competitive there. So when they say he's Jim's #1 fan, he's Jim's #1 competitor. There you go. I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on the double-sized Wolverine number 50, Secrets Revealed and Mysteries also created for another day too. Let me know your thoughts on this one in the comment section. If you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like and share the video. It really does help the channel. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.